Now, South Africa's agri sector is a critical stakeholder in the B20. In the meantime, while recent rains are set to boost the industry recovery, the 2024 SA Food Security Index highlighted food insecurity as a risk for the country. With this, the current picture, just what should the agri sector's B20 agenda look like? Agbiz chief economist Wandile Sihlobo joins us with his thoughts. Wandile, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Now, with things rapidly changing after we took over the G20 presidency, especially when it comes to the geopolitical picture as Trump's trade policies just take center stage, I can imagine that, what's happening at the B20 meetings, it's not business as usual. With that, or rather considering that, what should be some of the top priorities for the agri sector within this current environment?
I think the agricultural agenda should really center around probably four things this year that South Africa is leading. The first one has to be on trade. I think the core message South Africa should put on the table and continue to advocate for is openness in our borders, because we know that the more countries trade together, the more globally everybody benefits on that. And in that point, we do have self-interest because we are an export-oriented agricultural sector, and we want to see more and more of the world embracing some of the products that we have to put in the world market. The second aspect, I would say, around climate-smart agriculture, and this is going to be important not only for us as South Africa, but the broader African continent. There's a lot that can be learned from the EU, from Australia and other countries about what technologies and how they are adapting to technology, and that should be part of our streams of work. The third aspect, I would say it must be on fertilizer trade. That not so much of South Africa, but the broader African continent, because with the exception of South Africa and Zambia, there's very low fertilizer usage in the African continent, and that low fertilizer usage, it leads to the low agricultural productivity. That is a challenge. The last part that I think is also a crucial stream of work that could be under agriculture is a question of saying, how do we share technologies in the sector, biological as well as mechanical, learning on who's doing what. And I think if agricultural work stream can have those points, that could be beneficial for global agriculture.
We'll get into those points a bit further, but I want to start off with the part around self-interest, right? We are, hosting the G20, and with these B20 meetings underway, we need to, consider self-interest. But how do we then strike that balance between self-interest and also pushing through the African agenda, considering that we are the first country to host, or rather to take over the presidency of the G20?
What is good for South Africa, most of the time, it's also good for the broader African continent. No one in Africa would say today, when we advocate for broader and an embrace of open markets, would say we are out of order with that. We just all signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which on itself is a statement of saying the African continent want integration in terms of trade. So doing that and looking at the regions of the stronger economies and saying, let's lower import tariffs, let's remove any barriers that are there, let's embrace each other. We think that process will lead to a better world. But of course, there's many in the near term in the African continent that may not benefit because they don't have the mass volume to trade, which is why advocating for trade concurrently while talking about fertilizer to boost agricultural productivity is a very important step from a South Africa side when we're thinking about continental agriculture and food security issues.
On the side of, climate change, Southern Africa in particular has been dealing with a lot of drought. And I want to chat to you about just climate change investments, particularly at a time where we're seeing Trump sort of, ditching climate change initiatives in particular. Yeah.
Look, there may be countries that decide what posture they take, United States or whoever, But the bottom point is that each country has to decide what's good for themselves. And I think for South Africa and many countries in the African continent, I'm thinking here Mozambique and even the eastern seaboard of South Africa, KZN and Mpumalanga and the others, that tend, when there are adverse weather conditions, to feel the impact. It's in our best interest to think about what climate resilient and adaptability method we should apply in our agricultural sector. And there's a number of things that can be learned and be done on that. One of those aspects is saying, technological wise, are there any better seed cultivars that are shorter growing time frame, but at the same time can adapt better to harsh climatic conditions? That needs to be done. What is India doing? What is Brazil doing? What are the others doing? That's sort of an insight that we're looking for. But also then the businesses that are involved, can they avail those technologies to each of the countries? And can the regulators in those countries be open to embracing those technologies and registering them and permitting them? That's the type of a conversation that we seek to have. And I think there's a lot more countries globally that are worried about these aspects. And I think those that do value these conversations should march forward and embrace them.
Now, Wandile, talk to me about how we can use this presidency to also just benefit smaller farmers in the country, the ones, that don't necessarily have access to global markets.
While the exports are always largely directly benefiting the large farmers, but when you are exporting, prices tend to be better. And I think indirectly, even the medium and the small scale farmers do benefit in that conversation. You take an example of South Africa when we say, let's export more beef to China. It may be the large farmers that actually meet the quality specifications to export beef to China, but that lifts prices and it indirectly benefits all farmers.
And then let's talk about, just general opportunities this G20 presidency presents. You just talked about how it could, benefit the smaller farmers. But overall, what kind of opportunities does it present for the agri sector to recover and improve?
Look, the challenges that we had faced as South Africa and the broader Southern Africa that led to poor performance in 2024 was largely climate related. We were hit by the midsummer drought, which led to a double-digit decline, about 21%, for example, decline in our grain production. Zambia, 50% down in their maize crop. Zimbabwe, about 60% in their maize crop. This was a climate issue, which again is why the climate smart agricultural practices should be part and parcel of the conversation at G20. We're not directly going to come up with key things to take home as in ready for implementation at the same time, but rather the policy conversation will begin to change. And that's the G20 part. And I think the B20 side on the business, opening up those opportunities for businesses across all countries to have conversation, that's going to be the important part of us. But I think broadly, this is important because South Africa now has the opportunity to lift the conversation and the discussion on things that are key to us, but also key for the broader continent.
And Wandile, before I let you go, the last time I spoke to you, you said a recovery in the agri sector is well underway, and I can imagine all the rains we've had over the past few weeks are just boosting that outlook. Talk to me about what you've seen over the past 2 months and what things look like in the agri sector.
We have just traveled across some provinces in South Africa right now. We were in the Free State, parts of the Eastern Cape, parts of Mpumalanga. What we get to see as we travel across the country is optimism amongst the farmers, and secondly, just the agricultural conditions also improving. The grazing felt has benefited from the recent rains. And of course, right now you have higher maize prices, so feed costs are an issue for the livestock industry. But I think the recent rains, they provide that relief. If you are in field crops, grain, oilseeds, and sugarcane production, the rains that we have received over the past few weeks, but also from mid-December, have benefited greatly. We now looking at a better crop and a better performance on the sector. In terms of fruit and vegetables, with Botswana in vegetables opening up its market, facilitating our exports, but the dam levels across South Africa having improved, that has put the fruit and the vegetable industry in a right space. So overall, we see 2025 as a recovery period for the growth of the sector, jobs to remain resilient, and also within the food price inflation from the end of second quarter towards the end of the year to really continue to see great moderation.
All right, Wandile, thanks so much for your time and just sharing those insights. That was Agbiz Chief Economist Wandile Sihlobo.